Orthodontists don't want to use the word profit. It's almost like a dirty word. Like if I said to somebody, how big is your practice? They got no problem telling me they did $3 million last year. If I said, oh, and what's your overhead? Oh, 50%. Okay, so your profit is $1.5 million. But if I said to them, hey, what was your profit last year? It has this dirty, filthy feeling. Ew, you've reduced me to money. Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. Today, we've got the esteemed Dr. David Boschken. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate it. Love being here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on. And let's start here. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you practice, where you went to school, and how did you become an orthodontist?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. Well, I'm from California. I went to Berkeley undergrad, and then I went back east to University of Pennsylvania for dental school. And then I went even more east, went to England for a residency, and back to Penn for my ortho specialty. And so I think in terms of why I wanted to be an orthodontist, I think it always comes back to, for a lot of us, maybe the influence we had as a young kid in braces. And Dr. Andresen, my orthodontist, was absolutely fantastic and loved his team and loved the fish tank and the train around the perimeter and all the fun little, I guess, subliminal marketing ploy that he had to get everybody to come into the office all the time. And then my chairman of my ortho program was Dr. Van Arsdale, and just a huge giant in the profession, and really loved everything that he taught us. And so that really got me excited about going into orthodontics, and moved back to California in 2000. I'd been trained with Invisalign as a resident in 1999 and moved back to California, brought my first practice in San Jose, and from an orthodontist actually that had been trained with Invisalign maybe 3 or 4 months before, had about a dozen patients, and then he retired. So I was stuck with these dozen patients, and here I am, early product, attachments were huge, the aligners were certainly
and
not
round. The attachments were huge and round. I remember those days.
Carrying up the lip and the cheeks, and oh my gosh, it was great. And we had to sign a waiver back then. I don't know if you remember this or not, but anything over like 3 or 4 millimeters of crowding, Invisalign would make us sign a waiver, basically saying that this is not an Invisalign case. Good luck. And it was a legal document that I probably signed that 100 times in those early years for cases that, I was going, as far as I could with the product. And then certainly within a couple of months after really getting my feet wet with Invisalign, very low share of chair at that point, but just starting cases here and there, I got a call from the co-founders of Invisalign, Zia Kisti and Kelsey Worth, and they asked me to come on board and start lecturing for Invisalign. They had spent half of the $60 million that they got from Kleiner Perkins and went direct to consumer. So they created this huge consumer awareness campaign, but no doctors were certified. So that's where I came in, and a few of us other orthodontists came in and onboarded and started training. And before I knew it, I was training also on the GP side as well. And I've been dual channel for 23 years and given over 600 Invisalign lectures globally. And fortunate enough to be able to beta test really every product. I'm on the board of the iTero, clinical advisory board of iTero, and so get all the new fun stuff that comes out of there as well. So it's been a fun journey, and certainly when it comes to increasing share of chair, everybody has to have their own sort of push in life. I often say that change happens either because of inspiration or desperation, and I think it was desperation for me, because I was seeing 100 patients a day, trouble call appointments, white spot lesions, broken brackets, mom's upset with us. And that was, I think, the genesis to create that narrative that we no longer wanted to be a tooth mechanic for 40 years, seeing 100 patients a day. And that's where we made that change. My COO, Nicole Pruitt, who's also an Align speaker, she and I sat down 7.5, 8 years ago, and we made that decision on that next Monday. We were going to stop offering braces, and that's exactly what we did. And took about 2 years to get to 98%. And we hover around 97, 98, depending on the amount of light force on any given quarter. We are 100% digital, so we lean heavily into light force to complete that full digital experience that we offer, certainly our patients. So anyway, that gives you a little snapshot.
You just covered like 5 podcasts worth of information right there. I just want to say that out loud. But let's go back a little bit. So you graduate dental school, you graduate ortho, you go to England, which I know is a story in and of itself.
Yeah.
You come back, you end up in California. Those early days of Invisalign were certainly interesting. I was a GP at the time, and they were marketing heavily to GPs. And I remember sitting a lot of courses. I did about 4 dozen cases that I can still find online, mostly for pre-restorative, because most of my orthos didn't know how to do Invisalign, and patients weren't necessarily going for brackets. And so I was trying to set up my own cases, minimal setup to get proper spacing for veneers or crowns or whatever I needed. And man, those round attachments, that was just like, like grabbing a barrel and trying to move it. And those days were crazy. And what was even crazier for those people out there who remember 20 plus years ago when Invisalign was really new, the way they were selling it was such, like, in many cases, I'm sure it wasn't you, but I remember sitting in a lecture and the guy was telling us how he basically set up an annuity in his life by having, for retainers, that when he finished treatment, people could call an 800 number. There was no real online purchasing at that time. Call an 800 number, leave their credit card, and get a new set of retainers shipped to them. Now, granted, the whole room, and there were at least 150 GPs sitting in that room that day as a local lecture in Bellevue, Washington, where I was living at the time. All I can tell you is, on one hand, I was horrified to hear this guy say, yeah, it's a moneymaker for me. They just lose a retainer, they call the number, we take their credit card, we tell a line, they drop ship it to them, and they get a new retainer. And I was like, A, I shouldn't have been horrified because it was a brilliant business strategy. But B, think about what this guy was doing back in like 2004 or 5. He was doing the essential same as teledentistry 20 years ago, because he had I don't know what became of him. I hope he's okay. I don't know what his name was. But it was a crazy time to see how they weren't just trying to innovate plastic. They were trying to innovate the entire business world of ortho. And I think that's what generated so much animosity, so much negativity from the staid, traditional models, was look at what they're trying to do. They're trying to destroy the profession. And again, you were, I think you said, the first ever Align faculty member, right?
I was one of 3 initial Align faculty members. And that those were the wild days in the very beginning, when the attachment protocol, the IPR protocol, the staging protocol was more analog than digital in many ways. But to your point, I think I think I know who you're talking about, by the way, who went to Bellevue. I did a lot of Bellevue lectures during those.
It wasn't you for sure. I guarantee you.
Because I wasn't.
You guys, let me just say this. You guys don't look at all similar.
Yeah. Okay. Because I can appreciate the scalability that doctor was trying to convey in those early days. And that is that it is nearly impossible to be a single doctor, whether or not you have one office or 2 offices, and try to start 1,000 cases a year with wires and brackets. That's just not, you can have 25 team members, but when you look at your FTE, your full-time equivalent, the math just is upside down. And I don't think that we're really looking at our profession really from a KPI perspective, and really looking at it like, are we generating, all of the profits that we really can? Are we delivering the exceptional customer service experience that we're really trying to get and give to our patients? And I think that it's really important that that has evolved over the years. And that's that uniqueness of all this, is that it's evolved to the point where we can scale operations with clear aligners in a way that we could never do with wires and brackets. That doctors happen to be on the front end of probably thinking about that, because now you have DSP, now you have the Vivera subscription model, which is, as of this month, these retainers will be delivered directly to your patient's home.
Right.
And so that's 20 years earlier that they were thinking about that.
But, with all the things we said we're going to talk about and discuss, we've gone down a rabbit hole, which is a good one, because you talked a little bit about a couple of things. You said profitability, right? KPIs. I think orthodontists, as much as almost anybody I've ever met, and you live in the sort of the breadbasket of venture capital, private equity, not so much private equity. Yeah, there's private equity.
Well, there's a lot of private equity around here.
But the venture capital is really what you guys have become known for, right? The startups, the the pets.com getting, these crazy valuations. But orthodontists, again, as much as almost anybody, don't want to use the word profit. It's almost like a dirty word. Like if I said to somebody, how big is your practice? They got no problem telling me they did $3 million last year.
Mhm.
If I said, oh, and what's your overhead? Oh, 50%. Okay, so your profit is $1.5 million.
Yeah.
But if I said to them, hey, what was your profit last year? It has this dirty, filthy feeling. Ew, you've reduced me to money. And I think in today's day and age, more than anything, we need to run it like a business. Nobody has a problem running it like a business until you start talking about money. And these people went to grade 23 to become an orthodontist, took out hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans. And yet, if we sit in a circle, right, or you go online to a lot of groups, all anybody wants to talk about is got to do great ortho, got to do great ortho, got to do great ortho. Hey, he's not doing great ortho. And they tend to forget the fact that, in my opinion, the overwhelming majority of orthodontists that I've met are doing good ortho.
Yeah.
Are they all, and I'll throw a name out here, are they all Stu Frost? Who, again, I love Stu, and you see his finishes, and they're spectacular. Are they all Stu Frost? Are they all capable of being Stu Frost? Not necessarily, but are they all doing more than adequate ortho to turn out? Absolutely. So let's stop having the conversation about, are you doing good ortho? Are you doing good ortho? The overwhelming majority are doing good enough ortho, but they're not, right? Stu Frost, we can all sit here and say finishes cases gorgeously. We could also find people like, say, Ben Fishbein, who built, $23 million practice, right? Two totally different practices. But are you focusing on the profitability and the KPIs of your business the same way you're focusing on the finishing details of your cases? Because if you took 100 hours of CE last year and 90 of them were on finishing and 10 of them were on your practice, I would argue it's time to flip those numbers upside down.
And actually, not to take anything away from, like, let's say Ben, Ben serves a need in his community, especially in that area where, access to orthodontics, it might be a struggle for people to afford orthodontics, in that area, as there is in a lot of different areas in the country. And the fact that he's been able to create a consistent formula played across multiple locations, I would say that those people are better off in his organization than maybe that doctor that has a single office that just doesn't really care about the money, or doesn't care. Maybe they care about the finish, but then maybe these people are getting Herbst appliances and full wire and brackets and headgear. Like, maybe they're not getting the latest technology that certainly is out there. And so I can appreciate people that really bring their A game and understand the economics, because then they're going to be more efficient. Because if you're not really paying attention to, let's say, the number of appointments, which I have like Excel spreadsheets built out of all my cases. So I know that my average number of Invisalign appointments is 7.5 appointments on average. And I know what I charge minus out the marketing bill, the lab bill. And so I know what I'm making per appointment. So for me, it almost becomes a game. I'm gaming it to the point where, like, I don't want to make $200 an appointment. I want to make $1,000 appointment. And while that's not going to change my level of care that I'm going to render, but it does also help the patient not have to stay in the system for 2 years and burn out. And ultimately, they don't even finish. And this is where, like, recently there was a chat, John White on the Pioneer Group. They were talking about just about how Align was going to get rid of the 5-year unlimited. No, they weren't. I mean, Align was not. Yes, they're talking about it because they're shifting towards the 3x3 product, because it's more profitable for Align long term to do 3x3 than this 5-year kind of timeline for Align to kind of capture their money.
And by the way, Dave, just for a second, for those out there who don't know, because when Dave and I get together, we talk fast and we cover a lot of subjects. And I think we're losing people a little bit because there in the breath, you threw out a word, Pioneer Study Club, and you threw out John White. And I do think we should, for just a moment, take a second and just pause. John White, out of the Cleveland area. He's been around.
Fantastic guy.
Great. I love the guy. By the way, quick aside, little fun fact for everybody listening. I met you and I met John at the same Align summit when I saw you speak and I saw John speak, and I sought both of you out privately and said, I got to meet you. I don't know who you are. I don't know the first thing about you, but your story is incredible. What you've done is incredible. And it may not be for me right now, but I need to learn how you did it, how you got there, and you were so gracious with your time. John was so gracious with his time. And John has something called the Pioneer Study Club, which is for top tier plastic practices, right? But specifically Align practices,
top
not
1% Align,
top 1% Align, which I've been for about 3 or 4 years now. And if you're in there, you have the opportunity to really do a deep dive into a lot of the concepts that we're talking about now. So when he mentioned Pioneer Study Club, when he mentioned John White, I just wanted to pay homage to him for just a second there.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. And to John's, this group, there was, a message that had been sent out like a week ago or so, just about how Align was going to be ditching, that refinements would be after 5 years, the case is closed, you're not going to reopen it and all this. And so there was a lot of pushback on that. And, at the end of the day, I think Align always does want to do the right thing for their customers. And so, John was able to speak to some people about that, and I did too on my end. And I talked to Joe Hogan about it actually. And at the end of the day, Align is going to keep the 5-year policy. But if it hits that, it's over slightly 5 years, I wouldn't go back to Align if it's 8 years out. But if it's certainly within 6 months after the 5 years, you can talk to your territory manager. And I'm sure that they will reopen the case without any problems at all. You can quote me on that. Align's not going to get upset with me by saying this. They want to do the right thing. And so, and
the policy is there because you have to have a policy,
you do.
Right? If there's no policy, anything goes. But this is a rule that's meant to be broken.
Which to my point on all of this regarding the 5-year thing is that we've been offering a 5-year guarantee for a good part of 15 years, 16 years, whenever they came out with that 5-by unlimited thing product. But we've been kind of leaning away from it, or thinking that we were going to lean away from it for the last a year or so, because we get these people that ultimately don't have a fire underneath their seat. And then they leave for 2 years and they blame it on COVID. And they come back and they're like, well, your case is still open. So we go back into treatment and all this. It drags it out. And so Nicole and I made a decision early February of this year, 2023, where we decided actually the majority of our cases are going to be the 3-by-3. So we rewrote all the contracts. And so we're actually doing 3-by-3, unless they're like big segmental cases where we have to do either surgery with Invisalign, or we're using distalization techniques or extraction. And we're going to need a good runway that might go up against the ceiling of 3 years. And so otherwise we're 3-by-3. So that's 3 years that it's active. You get 3 refinements. And if you do a 4th refinement, it's $130 roughly. So that's what a 3-by-3 means. And actually it's $106 difference between the 5-by unlimited and the 3-by-3. And so based on the number of starts, we'll save about $85,000 this year. Or in the next 12 months by going with 3-by-3 primarily rather than 5-by unlimited with everybody. So anyway, just wanted to clarify the different products that we're using in our office.
And let's be honest, 3 years to finish an aligner case should be more than enough.
It shouldn't take you that long.
It should be more than enough. And so I want to go back a little bit because you were talking about some really cool stuff earlier. Because I dropped a 5-Minute Friday podcast episode earlier today. Those of you who see it when it comes out, you'll see the same red shirt and you'll see the same pink background.
Nice.
And you touched on something that, again, you started practicing in California 23 years ago, I think you said.
Yeah.
Right. So between you and me in practice life, we got about 55 years of experience. We a couple of years under our belt. There was a post I put in Orthopreneurs this past week about a poll. Do you hand out all of your aligners at once when you give a set of trays to patients? Or do you keep some? Because I was talking to somebody who said, I don't give out I give 1 through 12 or 1 through 8. And it was incomprehensible to me. It was like, I remember the days I used to do that, but it was like, my mind was like, wait a minute, people still do that? And then I did a poll, and oddly enough, I think it was like 1/3 of people delivering aligners today. And I don't remember how many people, let's call it 100 people responded. It could have been more, but 1/3 of them aren't giving all the trays at the first visit. right?
Mhm.
Which, again, I don't know what your policy is, but I cannot imagine you're doing anything other than giving everything, because how would you possibly store the amount of people you're treating? But what was really interesting to me wasn't the decision whether people give all of their trays or some of the trays, and there was some very good rationale behind why some people on an initial delivery, not a refinement, gave 12 trays and then started elastics, or gave 8 trays and then did IPR, whatever it might be. There were some good conversations there. The one that really sort of got me sort of up in arms a little bit, that I did my 5-Minute Friday on, was the one where people said, and I don't know if it's going to make your blood boil, but it got me because it screams ego to me, was, I don't give all the trays because I want my patients to come back because they want to be with me. They want the relationship, so they'll refer more. If they come back, then
Yeah.
I can nurture the relationship and get more better referrals, and patients want to come in and be seen every now and then. And I made the comment today of, if you went to the physical therapist who you love to death and they said, I need to see you once a week versus I need to see you once every 4 weeks, no matter how much you love them, there's no way on the planet you would choose once a week unless you're pathologic or lonely, right?
Yeah.
If you're lonely, then we have patients like that. They want to come and be seen. But do you believe that if you had technology at your disposal that allowed you to treat people in 7.5 appointments instead of 9.5 appointments, is there any, other than I believe I can do better care by seeing them more often, which I won't argue with you if that's your feeling. Other than that, is there any other reason why you would not extend out the appointment times?
So it's interesting. I probably would have answered this question differently prior to 2019, where we used to see patients at that point in 2019 back to 2010 for every maybe 10 to 12 weeks. And then, of
We
course,
were all the same. Before COVID, nobody heard of dental monitoring and
right.
nobody liked using Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. And I onboarded with Virtual Care, which is Invisalign's remote
Right.
monitoring product that's located on Invisalign mobile app. It's a complimentary service. And so I onboarded it as one of the first doctors back in middle of 2019, so before the pandemic. And it was clunky in the beginning, and now we have AI, and it's become much more robust. And I know you're a DM user, because of Smiles and all that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, remote monitoring has changed, I think, the narrative and the answer to your question, which is, I think ego is a little bit involved in this idea that we build these montages, these attributes to us, these gorgeous offices, and we think that patients actually want to come see us. They don't, actually, because what you had out of the pandemic is you had Uber, you had Instacart, you had DoorDash, you have Uber Eats, you have everything digital now on your phone, where you don't need to leave your house, and you certainly don't need to drive all the way across town to come for 5 minutes for us to say, yeah, it looks good. Yeah. Great job. I'll see you in another 12 weeks. And so what we've learned over the years is that, like, for the most part, we give all their aligners. They all, from ages 12 to, through the adult stage, we onboard them with Virtual Care. So we get the photos weekly. AI is being generated or evaluating those photos using the ClinCheck and the photos, superposes them, making sure everything jives. Then a message is sent out within 30 or 40 minutes back to the patient saying everything's great. And so we don't see them in the office more than every 20 weeks. So if they have 20 aligners, I only saw them one time during that 20 aligners, and I stage the IPR either at the first appointment, or if it's really crowded and I really can't do it, then I might bring them back at 10 weeks or 12 weeks if I have to.
But that goes back to the point of, you're delivering a better product by
Yeah.
bringing them back in 10 weeks. It's not, I'll just see you in 10 weeks so we can see each other.
Yeah,
You're
not
doing
at all.
uncrowd the lower anteriors a bit, create some
Right.
room for better IPR. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So we're round tripping. We're expanding the arches, procline the anterior, open up anterior space. Now I have space to get in there and do some slenderization. And I use a double-sided disc, 0.2 millimeters. I don't sit there with strips for an hour. I mean, not in my hands. And then we see them, and then again, a lot of my ClinChecks, I use IPP, Invisalign Personalized Plan. I have been since day one. So my ClinChecks are all fully automated, no human.
By the way,
Rika is
sorry,
ever
folks,
looking at them.
I'm going to translate IPP for you all. This is
Invisalign Personalized Plan.
Well, that doesn't tell them what it is if they
Oh,
don't know what so IPP for people out there. Whenever you say IPP, I just want to answer, yeah, you know me. I
I
have
know.
to go,
Sorry. I'm
naughty
sorry.
by nature back in the
I
old
feel like
days.
just the two of us are talking here, though,
Yeah.
right?
But the IPP is an AI based, a clinic, I want to say technician for lack of a better description, but your plans are developed through AI, which is learned machine learning of what works, what doesn't work, preferences, things like that. So again, can anybody have IPP right now? Or is it just,
Yes.
I know I have IPP, we use it.
It's now global. As of a few months ago, they're now onboarding doctors. And just a clarification, AI implies that it's the machine learning. That there's like a person in the background on a
Right.
computer. So a lot of what this is that I did about 20 hours of onboarding, and I did about 8 sessions, 2 hours each, and we went through every case type. So let's say it's a class 2 case. Do I want sequential distalization? Do I want in mass distalization? When do I want cutouts? When do I want slits? All of that. And we went through all that. And then basically, their coders went through millions of lines of code to create a consistent ClinCheck that comes back within about 10 minutes of submitting my cases. So one of the big advantages is on a Monday at 10 o'clock, when my treatment coordinators will submit a case through IPP. No information needs to be put in there for the most part. And then within about 10 minutes, I get the ClinCheck back. And then I can use live update, 3D controls, live update. That takes all of a few minutes. I can accept the case. And basically the following Monday, the aligners are in my office.
Right.
So that's the power of what this scalability and the streamlining approach really gives, with now this individualized sort of treatment planning that Align has created. And they're still working on it. And it's not for every case type. It's not for, bicuspid extraction cases, right, surgical cases, first cases, phase 2 cases, refinement. It's not for any of those, but it's for comprehensive cases that you submit. So all of that has certainly made this whole streamline approach better. And back to your question that you had asked your viewers, which is, do you give all your aligners out? For the most part, we give all of our aligners out. If it's 4 boxes or 3 boxes, we might keep 1 or 2 of those boxes in the vault, which we have pretty big vaults for our Invisalign boxes if we need them. But for the most part, we're really relying on remote monitoring. We're using Chewies. So the proper technique, which nobody seems to explain to their patients, is you on a Sunday, you're going to be switching out. You wear your existing aligner number 10 the whole day. Then you take them out. You then eat, brush your teeth, put them back, the old ones back in. And right before you go to bed, you take 10 out, you put 11 in, and use Chewy. I use iChews from Steve down in Australia, and just use those for 10 minutes. That will fully sink the aligner on the teeth. You, of course, go to bed. You don't feel any pressure. You wake up, and now you vetted out all that prescription. What most people do is come Sunday, they're watching the Niners, they're watching the Cowboys, they're eating up a storm. They've never had their aligners in the whole day, and then I'm supposed to switch out. And at 9 o'clock at night, they put the new one in. And of course, what happened during the day? The teeth slightly moved. And it's actually, if you repeatedly do that over several aligners, by the time you get to aligner number 9, that's when you start seeing failure, especially around the upper laterals. And people are always like scratching their head going, why am I failing at 9? Well, because your patients aren't doing the right thing with switching out aligners. Anyway,
I love it. That's what I never knew that, but that's how I do it. Because my Saturdays and Sundays are the days that if I'm not going to wear my aligners well, it's going to be around family, friends, not just a football game, but, you're around the house all day long. You're not necessarily at work, and you're eating here, you're eating there. You left it out for 2 hours longer than you should have. And so I always use Sunday night as my change night, because I know Monday morning it's back to work, do my thing. I'm not going to be eating all day long. And it's amazing you said it, because that's exactly how I do it. It's just intuitive.
Well, just make sure that your team is saying the same thing to your patients.
Now they have to. It makes perfect sense for me. I didn't realize it for everybody else.
And by the way, the number 9, in case you're wondering, there used to be a product that Invisalign had called the Assist product. Mm-hmm. And that's where they would bill you out your first 9 aligners.
I
Then
remember.
you would send in a new PVS impression or a new scan. Then they would superimpose it over the original scan or the original PVS. And if it wasn't jiving, they would then manufacture the remaining aligners and mail them out to you. Or if the new scan was fine and the teeth are fitting, the aligners are moving the teeth properly, then they would build out those remaining aligners off of the original scan or the original PVS impression. And that was called the Assist product that was really geared towards the GP market to keep them out of trouble.
Right.
And the whole idea is you didn't want to give them all 20 because then chances are by number 9, they're failing. So you allowed them. It was kind of a mid-course correction built in.
And they still got in trouble.
They still got in trouble.
So with a little bit of time we have left, because we've got to wind it down, and there's so many things we can still talk about, but the good news, folks, is that next year's summit, which is going to be on a Royal Caribbean ship, we took over an entire ship. Nobody's on the ship but us. I tell people now that I have a yacht. It's 1,000 for one week. I have a yacht. It's going to be, I think, September 18th to 22nd, a Wednesday night. You board, you get back first thing Sunday morning out of Tampa. It's going to be ridiculous. And the lineup we have is incredible. It's mostly people that nobody's ever heard of, who I know personally are remarkable speakers on topics that are going to help take our practices to the next level and help us live a better life.
If you don't enjoy this one on the cruise,
oh my God,
Glenn is going to get you on a helicopter escorted by some people.
Three seagulls. Because we were joking before we came on that I have always offered for the summit what we call the free limo guarantee, right? If you don't think that the summit is the best meeting you've been to, you come up to me at the end of day one. I put you in a limo, I pay for it, send you to the airport, refund your tuition, pay for your airfare, pay for everything, and send you home. But when you're on a cruise, we got to wait. The first day is at sea, so there's only like 4 hours of lecture in the morning, and then you can enjoy the rest of the day. The next morning, we land in Cozumel, where everybody has a day off. They can do whatever they want. I'll fly you home from Cozumel, I promise. But if you're in Cozumel, and you know how bad the meeting has to be for you want to fly home instead of spending a day in Cozumel?
I can't even imagine.
It doesn't even work. But my point was, most of the speakers we have next year are people that, quite frankly, most of the people listening have never heard of. My tutor from England, of all places, who's one of the most brilliant marketers in the AI world. He just did simultaneously, he had AI artwork-driven campaign in Piccadilly Circus and in Times Square at the same time. Remarkable stuff. He's going to spend an hour just showing people all the ways that they can harness the power of AI for marketing purposes to grow their practices. And Stephen Caution, who's the former director of Orthopreneurs, to talk about all the software and hardware programs, not just AI, that will help automate workflows within the office in a very simple way, like Zapier is just one example. If nobody's ever used a Zapier, it's remarkable how you make a Zap. It allows you to say, whenever emails come in with this is automatically going to happen and generate this. It's incredible what we can do. But my point is, I've got lots of amazing speakers, one of whom is David Boschken, who's we're going to do a fireside chat for 30 minutes about some topics that are going to be relevant about how we can take our practices to the next level. So what I'm going to ask you before I let you go, because there's so much more we'll talk about next year on the cruise. And the best part is you're stuck on it for 4 days, right? So everybody, or 3.5 days. So everybody has a chance to talk to you over dinner, over lunch, whatever. What is the one thing that you see coming down the turnpike that's not existing right now that excites you? Is there anything? I know I didn't ask you this beforehand before we came on, but is there anything coming down the turnpike that isn't out there yet that you're able to talk about that really excites you?
Probably for me, that what's currently, Sean Carlson is a friend of mine, and he's
brilliant guy.
And he's come to my office recently, and he's coming again in a week or two. And he's talking about, he loves my office. He calls it 2.0. Now he's looking at 3.0. And I think that this new office design, it was funny that you actually recently posted about in your new office design to put a small little room for your team members, especially those who are nursing.
The mom's room, pumping room.
Mom's room, yeah. And I think that, I'm not getting excited about those rooms, but the whole idea is that I think our what we perceive as the future of orthodontics and office design is going to be dramatically different than what some of these designs that doctors are sending out on this group. And they're like, hey, what do you think of this? And it's like 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, and it's like 50 chairs and all of that. Hey, good for you. If you're in an area that can support that and maybe the math makes sense, I just don't think that that's where we go. I think we lean more into remote monitoring, more into virtual, telemedicine, dentistry, orthodontics. And so I'm really excited just about, where our profession goes to get to more access to people, because that's really it. If you talk about the number of people starting orthodontics every year, it might be 5 million in the US alone, but that's not even scratching the surface compared to the 230 million Americans that are certainly out there. So I think that we all need to really kind of redesign our mindset on what the office design looks like and what that flow looks like. And I think that I've pretty much perfected, the 2.0 version. I think Sean is really looking at the next version, which is like no reception, counter, and TCs and financial coordinators remote, and only 2 or 3 chairs, and really kind of leveraging that sort of environment. And then the whole payment system being completely a different payment system than we're doing right now. So that's my initial probably answer.
I agree. And, there's nothing wrong with having a 20-chair office, but with the staffing difficulties that people are having, it's not just the treatment, it's not just the outcomes. You're having challenges, great. So you have 20 chairs filled with patients. Are you able to find 20 assistants who are well-trained, who are going to stay with you? And again, I think I might have spoken to you about it on the phone a little bit. If not, people will hear more about it. But I started a company called Remote Response that's in its early stages right now to sort of take the burden of dashboard monitoring for remote monitoring off of people's plate, because a lot of people want to do remote monitoring, and right now it's only really for dental monitoring. It might move into other things down the road, but you got to start somewhere where people say, look, I really want to get into dental monitoring, but if I do that, I'm going to have to somebody monitor it. And let me tell you, folks, as somebody who currently is monitoring about 1,400 patients in his own practice, this is not I'll give it to Susie between patients sort of thing. It needs to be monitored effectively so you can respond to people, so that you can spot problems, so you can give advice. You can communicate with the scheduling side of things. There's a lot there. And so I saw a need, and it'll launch shortly. It's called Remote Response, to allow people to outsource it like a call center. Look, based on your customizable preferences, we'll handle all of the problems that pop up, and your office will be notified only when you need to schedule somebody, right? If someone lost their aligners and they're in Montana, they have no more with them, they need to come in and be seen, we'll link them up to the scheduling. But if the aligner doesn't fit well, we'll give them some videos to show them how to wear it. We'll show them, but they think they're talking to Dr. Boschken's office.
This is fantastic, Glenn. There's a huge need for that. And in fact, actually, I'm not doing a plug here for Brian Wright, but we use Wright Chat for all of our new patient onboarding. So when they call, they'll say, if you're an existing patient, press 1. If you're a new patient, press 2. And it goes to Brian Wright's, call center in Texas, and they are highly trained. These consumers don't even know that they're not talking to a Boschken Orthodontics employee, and they are so professional. They have access to our practice management system. We use TOPS, so they have access, and they're going into our schedule. And this is why when we were at 100 patients a day, 7 or 8 years ago, we were seeing maybe 1 to 3 consults a day. We see 8 to 10 consults a day now. And it's hard, when you're at 100 patients a day to put in those numbers. But now we see on average 40 patients a day.
I was going to say, you're not seeing 100 a day.
No, we see 40 on average. And then Wright Chat is then plugging in consults all day long. And also it's a consistent formula. It takes the heat off the front, because we want them to meet and greet up front. We want them to, answer maybe some calls, but not be on the call all the time. And that the onboarding process of like a new exam can take 20 minutes. If you're doing it the proper Panici way, it takes a while. I think just like what you're doing, if you've got 1,000 or 2,000 people that are on remote monitoring, you got to scale operations. Yeah. And I think
the money part of it. If you got 1,000 patients, I think dental monitoring and others have said one person can effectively handle about 1,400 patients. Now, I'm working on ways to scale that better. But if you got 1,400 patients and you got a person doing that full time, you're paying them at least $35,000 or $40,000 a year, minimum in today's day and age. And we can do it a lot less expensively and a lot more effectively with greater hours, right? You can, if you have a team of people, you can be open before your office opens. You can be open well after your office closes and be able to monitor those people effectively so they don't have to wait, 12, 14, 18 hours to get an answer. They can get an answer within a half an hour, within 5 minutes. And so when it launches, we're going to mark the metrics. But again, I'm going to tell you one last word. I'm going to leave you with this. And for everybody out there, pay attention to this because it's going to blow your mind. And I'm going to talk about it at this year's Orthopreneur Summit. I'm going to give a little sample, but go look at a program called AIR, AIR. Not very hard to remember what it's called, okay? And I think it's air.ai or chat.air.ai. But if you don't know about it, okay, it's going to blow you away. And what AIR does, it has AI to actually use a real voice that responds in real time to people based upon what it's learned that you've helped it input. And their demo is an amazing phone call that they recorded where somebody calls, "Hey, David, I want to talk to you about the whatever. And David goes, "I don't have time for this right now." And it cuts him off mid-sentence. He's, "I want to talk to you about, hey, I don't have time for this now." And the AI, without any help, responds, I'm sorry, I know how busy you are. And the takeaway is that it's so good that by the time the call is done, the person has actually bought the product. It is unbelievable how good it is. It is the ideal TC at overcoming objections in a reasonable way. And go to AIR and listen to it. It's going to blow your mind. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about it at this year's summit. Mm-hmm. But the point of it is, I actually got a subscription to it so that now I can help it train so I can build an ideal TC script, so that I can build an ideal new patient script. When people call the office, how do you walk them down the Panici, or whoever you want to mention way, but with even better verbiage than they can ever teach you because the AI is figuring it out. And I'm telling everybody out there, AI is not going to be the end of the world this week, next week, or 3 weeks. And if you think it is, I would argue, and I talk about this all the time, AI's biggest threat to mankind is not the end of mankind. Because I will ask all of you, tell me the scenario in which AI ends mankind. Many, people out there talk about it, but I want to hear how you think it's going to end mankind, right? What I see as AI's biggest challenge right now that I'm facing personally is I'm becoming dumber. Right? Because I use AI all day long. Write me a letter to Dave asking me if he'll speak at Summit. Respond to this mother who's pissed off. What would you say to her? My team member wants a raise, but she's really not deserving of it, but I don't want to make her feel bad. So how can I write an email or a text or something like that, or a script so I can speak to it? How do I spell check and grammar check this so it reads perfectly and make it a little bit cleaner and maybe a little more familiar as opposed to more formal? I do this all day long. So now when I need to write something myself, I'm not as smart as I used to be. Now, my wife would argue I never was that smart. But my point is, if you want to ask me about the biggest existential threat we have to mankind, it isn't mankind ending. It's that we're getting a little dumber. But my retort to that is we must endeavor to use technology to cut out the shortcuts in our life that we might not be using, but to use that extra time to do really cool stuff that does make us smarter. And to me, that's learning about things like AIR. It's like using the technology to allow me more time to learn about more technology, which does, flex my brain and allow me to use it in different ways. And so I know you and I could sit here and talk for hours, Dave. And I just want to say thank you for being on here today. My time with you has been amazing. And once you go see AIR, let's talk. And
I'm going to look into it. Actually, it sounds familiar.
Listen to the demo chat.
To do my love letters to my wife, but I'm gonna see if
I did it. Alyssa, hopefully you're not listening. But when I got turned on to ChatGPT way back in the day, I've been using it over a year now. When I first got turned on to it, I wanted to try the Turing test, right? The Turing test is when, you don't know if it's a human or not, right? It passes every test. So I wrote my wife, I asked it to write a love paragraph to my wife, Alyssa, just telling her how much I love her, but it had to be an everyday message. It couldn't have been like a Valentine's. It had to seem like it came out of nowhere just because I love her. And it wrote a paragraph, and I sent it to her in a text, and she wrote back and said, "Oh, sweetie, that was so kind of you. Thank you." And I think
you might want to call you Nicholas Sparks at that moment.
Yeah, well, I think I told her later on, but if not, sweetie, I really do love you. I swear. I'm just now too stupid to write you.
Right.
So, but anyway, Dave, thanks for your time today. I really appreciate you. Can't wait to see you at next year's summit.
All right. Thanks, bud.
We've got several stressors in our life. We've got a great profession, but we've got to deal with overhead. We've got to deal with productivity. We got to deal with team members that are outside of our control sometimes. And the great news is, all of these issues are addressed in depth in this year's curriculum at Orthopreneurs Summit. So please go to opsummit2023.com, sign up for the meeting that's almost sold out, that everybody's going to be talking about, that you really need to be at to be your best practice with the lowest stress and highest profitability. opsummit2023.com. Please join me there so that I can take care of you even better than you take care of your patients.